So Reese and I just came back from the States where we were introducing Jasmine to my parents who hadn't had a chance to meet her because of the pandemic. And when we were there, my cousins threw this big party to celebrate us coming back and bringing back Jasmine. And one of my cousins reminded me that even after just a few months of dating Risa, I knew that I wanted her to be my wife. Like, I knew that she was the one. I think it's actually what I said to her. But I was struggling really hard with the fact that Risa had two children in her previous marriage, and the idea of becoming a stepfather was terrifying. And the reason I'm shooting this video is because a friend of mine, Ranzo, on his channel, The Black Experience Japan, posted a video. It was a day in the life video featuring myself and the family. And a lot of people were asking about who the children were in the video, and they're Josh and Luna. And I wanted to address the 3% of the comments that really frowned on the idea of becoming a step parent. And I want to address this because I never wanted to become a step parent. That wasn't something I aspired to be. And frankly, I don't imagine it's something that anyone aspires to be. And I also think that it's probably a very taboo topic for reasons that I can completely relate to. It's often just considered something that's not ideal. Best case scenario, two single people want to get together and start a family and go that route. And, that was my intention going into relationships my entire life. It just so happens I met Risa, and in doing so, I met my best friend, my best lover in many ways, and the person I knew that I wanted to spend my life with. And Josh and Luna, frankly, are a bonus. And I wouldn't want at this stage to be with Risa without them. They've become such an integral part of our family. Like they are very much a part of the family that we have, and I wouldn't want it any other way. But it wasn't that way in the beginning. In fact, in the beginning, when I first told my parents that I'm dating this girl and she's got kids, for those of you who have African families, and by African I mean, in my case, specifically Kenyan, and more specifically Kikuyu, that's a really heavy conversation. And and it didn't stop there. I told my parents, we had a heavy conversation. I went to Kenya 2018, 2019, wintertime, summertime in Kenya, and spoke to my extended family. And again, that was an extremely heavy conversation with them, explaining this woman I'm dating and my interest in potentially marrying her. And it took me a good, I'd say, 2 years to really wrap my head around this idea of marrying a woman who has children and then becoming a stepfather. Again, I never wanted to be a stepdad, but now that I'm in this place, it's amazing. And so hopefully I can shed a little light on why I made the decision I made, and more specifically how I came to this decision. For those of you who may be wondering, why would someone, or why would you, Menya, or someone choose to do this? So basically, I had that conversation with my parents. My dad and I talk all the time about relationships. So at any point when I've been in a relationship, I've come home and talked to my dad about this person I'm with, and the pros and the cons, etc. And it never was as deep or serious as it was with Risa, because very soon after meeting Risa, I knew that she was special, and I knew that there was a very high likelihood that she becomes the person I marry and intend to spend my life with. So my dad, being the very pragmatic, rational person that he is, said to me, Menya, I want you to make a list. I've shared this story with a couple of my guy friends and probably some of my cousins, but I've never really made this public, so I hope this is helpful for those of you who are, again, going through potentially a similar situation, or are simply wondering how I came into this position. He asked me to make a list of pros and cons. Pros on the right, cons on the left. But not just pros and cons. He asked me to approach it in Ray Dalio principles format, which is to go and address first order, which is kind of immediate. Second order, which, this is pretty arbitrary, but could be maybe 1 to 3 years out. And then third order, which could be anything like 5 to 10 or 15 years down the road. Consequences. So kind of first order, second order, third order consequences. And I know it sounds really intense to think of consequences being a negative, but it's not intended that way. The word consequence is just kind of like action and consequence kind of thing. This could be positive things or negative things. In this case, it was, my decision to marry Risa. I would have made this list basically with anyone I chose to actually marry. But frankly, I had never talked to my father about that until Risa. So he had never presented this idea of first, second, and third order consequences. So anyways, I made this list, which I still have, and I have shown to Risa for reference. So before people were like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that, I actually showed Risa this after I made the decision to marry her, because I wanted to know, the process I went through, full transparency, because that's kind of how I am. And I think it was, I got to ask her, but I think it was probably interesting for her to see how seriously I took, stacking our relationship. Like love is a wonderful thing, but I think as anyone knows who has been in love is also blind and leads people to do, frankly, just absolutely stupid things. And so in the interest of really approaching this somewhat like pragmatically and not just with my love blinders on, I made this list. And frankly, the list was invaluable. I made the list. Frankly, there were a lot more pros than there were cons on this list. And I realized a lot of the cons weren't practical cons. They were ego cons. They were things like, what are my friends going to think of me if I marry a girl who has children? What's my family going to think of me if I marry a girl who has children? What are those things? So it was very much, what is the world going to think of my decision to do this thing? Not how do I actually feel about doing this thing? And it took a lot of self-talk and deliberation, and it didn't stop there. I actually deliberately went out and spoke to probably a dozen people who were either stepfathers, stepmothers, stepbrothers and sisters, or kids who had stepfathers or stepmothers. And all of those, I didn't seek them out. I just kind of realized there are people in my circle who are in those positions, and I made an effort to have conversations with those people about their experience and what their thoughts were with regard to it, because it was something that I was thinking about. And that, even more than the pros and cons list, I found invaluable, because basically people on the outside who have never dealt with any kind of stepfather, stepmother, stepchild, step whatever thing, really have a generally negative outlook on the whole thing. And frankly, I was one of those people prior to getting into the relationship that I'm in with Risa. So I understand those feelings. But virtually everyone on the inside of that, so the people who are the stepbrother, stepsister, stepmother, stepfather, or have a stepmother, stepfather, really had nothing but positive things to say about it, so long as the relationship was like a net good relationship, in the way that it was like there wasn't obviously anything like crazy going on at home. And I found that really encouraging. It made me realize that the perception of this step thing was quite negative, probably because of just the way that people frown on divorce in general and then remarrying. But people who were in it really had generally net positive things to say about it, which I was really surprised by. So it was a combination of my pros, cons, first, second, and third order consequence list, and these conversations with people whose opinions I valued and then actively sought out, that I was able to make my decision to marry Risa and take on Josh and Luna as essentially my own kids. And looking back, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made easily in my life. I'm married to my best friend. I have now 3 children who are all amazing. And I honestly couldn't be happier with where we are now. But again, more than anything, I wanted to shoot this because I wanted people out there who, again, have maybe seen what it is I'm doing and wonder, how did this happen, or how did he get there? In particular, me being a black guy here in Japan, married to a Japanese woman who has children, that's not common. And I actually don't know a single other person like me in that position in Japan. I don't mean to say that I'm the first. I can't imagine that I am the first, but I actually don't know anyone who's in a similar situation, specifically a male, specifically like an African American male here in Japan who's married a woman who has kids. So it's in terms of trying to find someone here who I could ask about that. I didn't find really anyone, but in terms of finding people who are, again, in kind of step situations, there are an enormous number of people who are in those situations. And as I said, the overwhelming majority have really had net positive experiences with it. And this is people, guys in men's groups. This is guys I've gone golfing with, guys in my immediate circle, like Sogo Toko, which is a group where it's essentially like a kind of men's group we started here in Tokyo. Friends from back home, cousins, nephews, uncles. Like there's so many. Like, I'm naming a lot of males, but in general, so many people who are in that position who had a lot of net positive things to say about it. So more than anything, I hope that helps shed some light on the decision that I made to marry Risa and become technically a stepfather. But to take it a step further and to kind of show you guys where we are now, it's actually not something I really think about. And I don't think it's because the relationship I have with Josh and Luna is essentially no different than the relationship I have with my 11-month-old Jasmine. And that says a lot. And I couldn't have known that it would be that way prior to making the decision and to being where I am now. But truly, we really are a big, fun, very imperfect nuclear family, and it's amazing. And so if you're someone who's either in this position or considering being in this position, or you've known someone who's in this position, I hope this video helps, again, shed some light on what that's like, and more than anything allows you to kind of empathize, and empathize might be the wrong word, kind of put yourself in the shoes of those people. Because the reality is, as I said earlier, no one really intends to become a step anything, but sometimes it happens. And again, for people who are in those relationships, it's oftentimes a really net positive thing, which, again, I found surprising, but now I'm in it and I realize that is the truth. So, as usual, thank you guys for watching, and I would love to hear your comments if you are someone who's in that position, or if you're someone on the outside looking in. I'm more than happy to read and respond to comments on it, because as I mentioned, the Black Experience Japan was probably 95% positive, but there was that 5% that really didn't take well to it. And more than anything, I guess I want that 5% to know it's probably not what you think it is. And if you're willing to put yourself in the shoes of the other, I think you'd be able to see that. So thanks for watching, guys. If you've got questions, please ask. If you've got any comments, I'm happy to hear them. And I hope this is helpful. See you next time.